What's up, everybody? We are back. John Delarose here. Delarose.com. That's DELARROZ.com. I have all my links in the description below. I'm a comic creator myself, so if you like my thoughts on comics, definitely go check those out. And I appreciate everybody who supports the channel and does so. All right, we are continuing along with Daredevil with the Epic Collection Volume 5, Going Out West. Now, I'd been waiting this for a while. This covers 1972 to 1974. And if you've followed along with the channel, I've read a lot of Daredevil lately, so this is just getting everything that's out and being read. This is 87 through 107 and a crossover with Avengers 111. Now, this is the end of Gene Colan's era, and it starts out with Daredevil, of course, moving to San Francisco, and he kind of moves in with Black Widow. So if you've ever wondered, like, why the Black Widow lore is so deep within Daredevil, this is a great spot to figure things out. It starts out with a fight with Electro, and Gene Colan's art is absolutely stunning. I love his, it's just got a nice gravitas towards it. It feels very good, very 70s. The cops in San Francisco aren't exactly like thrilled with Daredevil, who's even though he's of course doing things here, and thwarting some schemes. We get Kilgrave, the Purple Man, his return here in San Francisco. And I like to tell people at this point, like, I read this, and it helped me understand Mark Waid's run a lot more. Now, Mark Waid did not directly rip off this stuff, but, like, the whole San Francisco scene from Mark Waid is definitely a reference to this era, which gets forgotten in Daredevil a lot. And I think, actually, this is a little, like, for the Silver Age and into the Bronze Age stuff, this starts to get a lot better than, like, the Stan Lee stuff at the beginning of the 60s. So I love the Gene Colan art right here. Look at that Black Widow. That is just devastatingly beautiful. Now, she's got her guard Ivan living with her, and there's actually a Black Widow Epic Collection that kind of goes over the Amazing Adventures series she was in, kind of directly preceding this era. And so you can really, like, get a nice swath of Black Widow in here. And if you're interested in that character, I would actually pick this up and consider this kind of part of the Epic Collection also, because the series gets changed to Daredevil and Black Widow as a name in a few issues here. So beautiful stuff as they fight together. They take on Electro again. There's a whole big plot building here. And Mr. Fear shows up in San Francisco, he's a staple Daredevil villain. So we find out that it's not the original Mr. Fear. It's actually somebody who's taking over things here. As this goes along, the plot with Black Widow is kind of developing. There's a guy who's involved who shows up who's, like, from her past. And there's, like, this weapon that's showing up, and that's going to be a part of a whole ongoing storyline, which slowly unfolds over the course of this. Pretty nice. Gary Conway does a great job writing. I like Conway's writing a lot better than like Roy Thomas, I've noticed, from this era. Just, like, it's not quite as wordy, flows a little better. I mean, the Gene Colan art helps, too. I mean, the colors actually are pretty phenomenal. It's a little bit of a darker vibe than you get from a lot of the comics of this time. And here we go. The Blue Talon strikes. Now, here's some people are after Black Widow, and there's, like, this experiment that, like, she was involved in with somebody else, and they're trying to get this whole deal and bring it to, of course, like, you know, create a new world order and all that. It's that sort of storyline, and Daredevil and Black Widow, of course, have to stop it. It's a pretty silly, you know, Bond villain style storyline through this. You see, he gets the ultimate power, and he becomes invincible. And then Daredevil has to fight the Invincible Man. There it is. I do love the art. I think it's so pretty through here. It is a bummer when Gene Colan leaves the book after issue 100 here. It really is. But this was a fun story arc, and I liked how it built, you know, Black Widow loses a friend from the past. You know, she sees that this character was taking over things. Got Man-Bull breaks out of prison here. He's from, you know, some of the earlier issues. It's always like the funny coincidence of how they all, like, oh, we're going to go to San Francisco now, too, where Daredevil is, just by total random happenstance. It's a lot of fun, but he's going crazy over the course of this. This is interesting. So they actually, Daredevil actually goes to the hospital in this one. They like, the doctors refuse to take off his mask and are like respectful of his secret identity. That's a interesting thing here. It's the secret identity in this one's kind of ridiculous because like Natasha really doesn't have a secret identity, and yet Matt Murdock is living with her, and and they go off as Daredevil, and Daredevil happens to show up in San Francisco with her. It's like, okay, I guess nobody put that together. Now this is the start of the story, which will actually like goes through the rest of the volume, the Dark Messiah. So there's people who are starting to get like strange powers, and these strange powers are just getting crazier and crazier over the course of this. Steve Gerber takes over some of the scripting here. This is some like hobo street kid who like gets this power. He goes crazy. He starts to be this like messiah of San Francisco. You see the coloring starting to change a little bit to be a little more brighter, a little more 70s wild, as they're creating new characters. And he's got his Disciples of Doom. Yes. There's more fights against this messiah. We find out that this messiah is like a part of this like gang of supervillains, which then end up a part of things this is later on. He blows up the messiah, and then there's a couple other people who show up, and that's coming up soon, so we'll get to that. But then they all end up created by the same guy who's like really the mastermind behind all of this, which we'll see in a second. In this one, though, Hawkeye shows up, and we have a little hero-on-hero fight as Hawkeye wants Natasha. And Daredevil's like, no, she's mine. And it's cute. And eventually they get summoned to the Avengers because the Avengers need some help. And in this, like, Magneto is controlling a bunch of, like, the Avengers and stuff like that. It's really weird, like, with Wanda Maximoff being forced to dance for him. You know, she's his daughter or something. It's kind of odd. Black Widow and Daredevil show up and help defeat Magneto. Then they come back, and this is issue number 100. You see it's relabeled Daredevil and the Black Widow at this point. But issue 100 does do the typical thing. You've got Steve Gerber writing now. This is Gene Colan's last issue on art. It does that thing where it's like he, gets into a mental thing where he fights all of his villains in the mental thing. Because there's this guy named Angar, who, and there's like an interview from Rolling Stone, who's like, Daredevil actually recounts his origin to. For trying to keep the secret identity, he's not doing a very good job at it. But Angar makes things, when he screams, he like gives people delusions. And this continues in the next issue. And he does that. Now, over the course of this, there's these like kids Daredevil brought in who like are being framed for crimes. And his law group is actually like fighting them. And like, going to force them to plea guilty, even though Daredevil knows they're not guilty. Now, there's very little Matt Murdock sort of drama in this book going forward. I mean, it's like a couple pages. It's like they realize they have to continue that plot, but I feel like Gerber and all that really doesn't want to deal with it. This is a fill-in issue. Chris Claremont and Sid Shores on art, and I guess they're trying to solidify the art team or whatnot. Stiltman shows up in San Francisco. And they just have to deal with him. So, I mean, this is a nice single one-off issue, but, I mean, it really doesn't add much to the whole plot. Then you get back into this, and Ramrod shows up. So he's the third villain in this trio that's being in charge of things. And I guess Daredevil needed a little sales help because Spider-Man shows up at this point. Don Heck takes over art again for Daredevil. And Don Heck's art's all right. You can just see it's clean. It's a little simpler than Gene Colan's art. It's just not as detailed, not as, I'd say the figures aren't as nice. There's nothing wrong with it. It's all right. He tells his story pretty good. And they defeat this character together with Spider-Man's help. And then, of course, since Spider-Man showed up, Craven the Hunter shows up now. And, of course, he does not reference Spider-Man, which is kind of odd. I don't know why they went with that. But some bad guy is hiring Craven the Hunter to stop Daredevil. Craven kind of does so. They go to a zoo, of course, so you get the zoo fight with all the animals. Pretty typical 60s, 70s fare through the course of that. and Daredevil gets thrown off a cliff. This is where it gets really wacky. So actually, this page fell out. I don't know if there's a way to get the binding back for, like, to put a single page back in. I kind of don't want to buy this again, but if there's a way to glue this, let me know in the comments. I'm not, like, super hard on these books, but sometimes this happens, especially with the new Epic collections. They seem to be a little cheaply made. Now, this is an odd one. When Daredevil falls off the cliff into the sea, he ends up in a secret undersea base, and this ties into, like, Jim Starlin's Thanos epic. And Moondragon is just down here running a base, and of course she's actually created all these bad guys, it turns out. And she's doing it because, like, she thinks everybody's a thrall of Thanos, and she's trying to stop Thanos. So, I mean, pretty nice art through here. Lots of dialogue through here as they're explaining her entire origin, this entire past. I don't know why this got thrown into Daredevil, of all things. It just seems like Jim Starlin had his Thanos thing, and it's like, maybe with an extra issue of Daredevil we could throw it in here or something. And he goes, okay. I have. It really doesn't fit at all. It's bizarre. But Angar and all them show back up, and then there's a new villain called Terex, who's, like, coming straight out of the earth, and everything he touches gets destroyed. He's so badass. He's badass. Very odd villains. So it turns out Matt Murdock's one of his law partners is actually the mastermind behind all this stuff. He shoots Moondragon and tries to take control over all these monsters. And this is what we deal with for the next couple issues here. Moondragon's presumed dead. She's not actually dead, of course. It's a little hokey, I gotta say, through the course of this whole deal. And in the final issue here, the law guy merges with Terex into this, like, giant being. He's going to be the ruler of San Francisco, he says. We have Bob Brown on art. I don't even know who that is. Sal Buscema does the inks. You know, it's okay. I mean, it's just not Gene Colan. Gene Colan's art was so pretty at the beginning of this. It was really nice. And this is just kind of standard House Marvel letdown. I mean, it's okay. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It just isn't Gene Colan. And oddly, Captain Marvel shows up. It's like a Deus Ex Machina to end this, because they can't really, like, Daredevil doesn't have the powers to be able to fight this thing. We get a little bit of Thanos talk again. And that ends the volume once, like, Captain Marvel gets this guy set up with, like, anti-life or something like that. He tried to explain it, and it kind of doesn't make sense, and then he just flies off and leaves Daredevil there with that, and that's the end of the volume. All right. So I really like the Gene Colan part. I mean, it was great. That was some of the best early Daredevil I'd read. Like, I'd say actually volumes 4 and through issue 100 were fantastic. And I can see why Mark Waid wanted to do this era, like, homage to it with his own sort of run. However, after that, it gets really hokey, like with, like, the over-the-top crazy superhero stuff that is cosmic and doesn't make sense for Daredevil to be in. It just doesn't feel like it fits. There's not enough personal stuff. Like, they really should be developing Daredevil's and Black Widow's relationship a little bit more. I mean, they touch on it a little bit here and there, but it's like they feel like they just better forced to do it every couple of issues or so, rather than actually building a nice plot there. And that's a big failing of this. If you look at the good stuff from the Silver Age, it's always like the actual character dynamics, like Peter Parker's growth as a human being with his friends. That's really cool stuff. Like the Fantastic Four family dynamic, always good stuff. Since we don't really have that here, it's kind of glossed over. It just, it just falls flat in spots. So first half of this is great. Second half, not quite as much. Still worth the read. I'll still call it a 7.5 out of 10. So my average score is 7. So it's a little better than average. But, I mean, it gets kind of weird towards the second half of this volume here. All right, hit that like and subscribe button. We'll be back soon.